Hello, my name is Abraham Klein, and today I would like to talk to you about a book I recently read. It is a book put out by an organization known as Operation Underground Railroad. They are an organization whose existence is for the purpose of saving children, specifically out of human trafficking, and that these are victims who have been through trafficking, whether it be for moving drugs across different places or for sexual exploitation. Just a very unfortunate institution that exists in our day. It is, in many ways, the modern day slavery of our day. People that are being sold and owned and bought by other people. Something that, thankfully, in our day is an unthinkable act. Um, but that's what this book is about. It goes through stories and it actually shows different artwork that many of the those that have come out of it have done, just different expressions of how they feel, just ways of helping them to cope with their trauma and get through the obviously very difficult process of healing after being a victim of human trafficking. So, as I said, this book tells different stories, and this was not my intention when I first started reading it, but um, as a person who has been through a lot of physical issues in my life, different challenges that I've had to, unfortunately, had to overcome. I'm always looking for just different lessons that I have learned or lessons that I could learn that can also help other people. And so, as I read this book, I read what you might call survival tips or ways of helping through difficult situations in life. Now, these are very extreme examples. Obviously, Lord willing, none of us ever have to go through the type of pain and trauma and tragedy that these unfortunate children have had to go through. Thankfully, as far as I know, everybody that is spoken of in this book are now in a much better place and a much safer environment. And Lord willing, it stays that way. And Lord willing, along the way, more and more people, more and more children, more people will have been rescued from this awful institution of sex trafficking and human trafficking as a whole. Um, so as I said, there were some things that stuck out to me that have spoken to me, have helped me, and hopefully they can help you. First, I would encourage you to buy this book. As I said, this is called Not for Sale. It's by Operation Underground Railroad. You can look them up online. Operation Under Railroad, Operation Underground Railroad, I believe it's .com or .org. It doesn't matter if you put it in the search engine. I'm sure you'll be able to find it. I actually started donating as a result of following them on Instagram, and that's where I found their. I mean, I'd known about them for a long time, but I ended up finding them on Instagram, and then that's ever since then I've been attempting to try to support them monetarily. Pretty much ever since then, which is how I got this book. So if you do buy this book, the money does go toward helping Operation Underground Railroad to assist not only with finding these children and saving these children, but also rehabilitation that happens afterward. Because unfortunately, it's not something that's, oh, they're saved now, they're saved out of their captors, now everything goes back to normal. It'd be nice if it was that way, but unfortunately, there has to be a lot of getting them back to normal life. And so, as I said, these are some things that I learned from this book, and hopefully, they've encouraged me, and hopefully, they can encourage you as well. Because even though we may not go through these extreme situations, there are obviously unfortunate situations, tragedies that happen in our lives, and so these are the ones that I found. Number one, and this is not necessarily to help us as far as going through what they went through, um, but is something that ought to bring, if nothing else, to us gratitude. Because a common theme that was throughout this book were stories of children who had parents, teachers, sometimes it was a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and ended up selling them into trafficking, using them, selling their children for one night or one day or for whatever favor, disgusting thing that might have happened. Sometimes there were children. There was a girl in here whose own mother, just unthinkable to just think that a mother could be that depraved to try to sell her own daughter for unspeakable acts as that. And um, I personally read it, and I obviously felt very sorry and very empathetic toward what they've been through, but it also gave me reason to be thankful because by the grace of God, um, I didn't have to grow up with that. I had parents who were older, and so there was a lot of things. Obviously I grew up poor as well, and so there were a lot of things that I didn't have. Even some of my poor friends uh, had that I didn't have, and so it was something that I had issues with growing up. But as I grew up and grew older, I began to understand that my parents, if they could have, would have done would have done so much more for me. But I knew that they did the best that they could. They loved me. They didn't abuse me. Praise the Lord, they didn't sell me into trafficking to try to pay bills and different things like that. Um, and so the first thing that spoke to me was just gratitude. And and my heart does go out to anybody that may be watching this who has been in an abusive situation, or maybe you're even somebody watching who's been through trafficking. And this is not to say that God hasn't blessed you or anything like that, um, but I personally can't help but be thankful for the blessing, privilege, whatever you want to call it, that I've had to not have to go through that. But number two, I want you to notice something where there's this one girl in here, and it's an inspirational story to say the least, because this is a girl who was 7 years old. Her name, or they call her Sabrina. I think they might have changed some of the names, for obvious reasons. And she had been abused. There was online child exploitation videos of this little girl, just awful, these awful humans that do these kind of things. And she was the time came for those accused to face a trial. When the request came that Sabrina testify against her traffickers in court, AUR Aftercare carefully considered the ramifications. Having a child recount their horrific abuses can cause additional trauma, and every option to avoid such trauma should be considered for, again, obvious reasons. When presented with the prospect of telling her story in court, Sabrina bravely asked to be able to face those who had hurt her. AUR's aftercare partners were with her every step of the way, helping her feel strong and safe while in the courtroom. During the testimony, 7-year-old Sabrina continuously talked about two other men that had hurt her. These were Americans who lived in the country who were unknown to the police until then. Sabrina's testimony also led to two more girls, ages 10 and 12, who had been violated by these same two men. And that just is so inspirational. It's obviously very tragic what happened. But to think that somebody in such a horrible situation was not only, happy to be away from those people and glad to see her abusers go on trial, but this little girl, this 7-year-old girl, was brave enough to face those men, those awful men who hopefully something will burn in their minds for the rest of their life, and see themselves as the cowards and that girl as the ultimate victor and ultimate hero at the end of all this, as she stood there and bravely told of what those awful men did to her and how it resulted in two other girls also being rescued. I mean, just an absolute beautiful story. And it just goes to show me, and hopefully to you, that when it comes to tragedy, or if you're out there and you've been through an abusive situation or a traumatic situation, that from what the example I've seen, it's possible to be bold before your trauma. There's sometimes people who have trouble going back to a certain place or seeing a certain thing or something that might trigger a bad memory in their brain, and instead of fearing it and avoiding it, they face it. And as difficult as an exercise as that is, it's very helpful. It really helps. And to see that was just so inspirational to me, that little girl, and how she just showed so much bravery, so much bravery. And hopefully it can teach us to also be brave as well. Um, and then I want you to notice that, and this is very important, it's not exactly inspirational thing, but is definitely a warning to any of us who have been through a traumatic event or could potentially go through a traumatic event, is that getting out of that dark place is only it's only beginning. Like, you see a person and they've been through a really hard battle with cancer, or in my case, I was 6 years on dialysis. I was in the hospital for 6 months stays and stuff like that. And getting out of that is just the beginning. It takes a lot of readjustment, and it's for these people. It gives examples in here of some who had been taken out of that life and unfortunately ended up going back into it, and as far as I know, most of them end up being helped. But the idea that them going back into that or falling into a dark place is somehow this, how in the world could you do that? Um, it's only half the battle, because now they have to be reassured you're worth something. They have to be reassured that their life is not worthless, that their life wasn't wasted, their life has a purpose. And unfortunately, a lot of those abusers do that, and when it comes to any kind of trauma, focusing on that trauma in such a way that you allow it to keep you from doing anything or moving forward in your life, you can't let that happen. And again, so often we think we're out of the woods, so to speak, once that tragedy or that event or whatever it may be, that abusive situation may be over. But that's just the beginning. Now you have to be healed. It's the difference between being set free and being made free. The idea of, like, unhooking a dog. Well, he can then run into traffic and get killed. And what was the good of his freedom? But if they have been given the resources, if they've been given, teaching and understanding to where they are reaffirmed and reassured in the positive aspects, then that gives so much better chance of making it. Whereas just being set free, so to speak, might just be the worst. Well, obviously it's not as bad as what they went through, but it can easily lead back into awful things in our life. And so you have to. It's always important, especially for those who only know people that have gone through these stuff like this. Constantly try to be there for them, because again, it's not over just because that traumatic event is over. It's important to constantly be mindful of where your mind, your heart can go, your emotions can go, in a moment of weakness, so to speak. And then I saw that when survival was in jeopardy, they had to find something to hold on to. And you may have seen, I think I might have already shown the picture, but here's it again. This was, I believe it was called Stars in the Night, is this painting of this girl. She was 13 years old, in Central America. And she said, during my therapy sessions, I drew the stars that I remembered while I was still trapped in the dark, because it gave me something to look forward to at the end of the darkness. Those stars were the hope I knew was out there, but I didn't know exactly what it was. And there's another story in here of a girl who painted dolphins, because when she was living in trafficking, she would watch the dolphins. And that was something she used, something she held on to during those very difficult times in her life. And I'll, to use the words of my pastor when he came to visit me when I was in a very dark place while I was in the hospital for an extended period of time, he came in and just bluntly told me, you have to find a reason to go on. Blunt as it can be, it really spoke to my heart, really made me realize, yeah, I can't just die in here. And whatever you're going through in your life, you can't just let it kill you. You have to find something to hold on to. And as a Christian, it's easy to just say, read the Bible, pray, trust God. That's obviously what you should do. At the same time, if you're just reading it and not really grasping it, if you're not really trying to get something from God, it can just become a tradition and a formality, and you're no better than you were before. Because instead of trying to seek God, you're just reading. You're just saying some words and things like that. And so, whatever it is that you have in your life, if it's your family, something to hold on to, because without that purpose, without finding purpose in that situation, it'll just end you. It'll be the end of you. And so, again, a very, very important thing that came to mind when reading this book was the importance of finding a reason to go on. And that has been a huge thing in my life, and I'm sure it's definitely a principle that could help all of us. And then the first story that they actually told in this book is probably the biggest one, the hardest one to live, the hardest one to really, I guess you could say, live out or use as the hardest one to truly live, I guess, is about this gentleman by the name of Quesno. He had a son named Gardy, and he was in Haiti. They lived in Haiti, and his son was trafficked. And so that's when AUR, I believe, was founded as a result of that, and also started their first mission down there. They believe that there was this orphanage down there they thought he might have been trafficked to, and that his son Gardy was trafficked to. So they went there. They ended up saving 28 children, but were unable to find this gentleman's son. And to this day, according to this book came out, I believe, this year or so, as far as I know, they've still never found him, which is, very sad, and, try to pray for this gentleman and, his family. But after he had delivered the news that they had saved the 28 children but were unable to find his son, he said, "We sat there in sorrow for about 20 seconds, and then he popped his head up. He said he was smiling. I saw the brightness in his eyes, the same warm glow that I remembered when we first met. I pondered, what is wrong with this guy? He is going through the worst nightmare any parent could imagine. In fact, I couldn't think of a worse scenario for any human being. 20 seconds after finding out his son, his kid, is not there, and have no idea where he is, he's smiling again. I sat back and looked at him. He sensed my confusion and shared, Tim, don't you realize what just happened? 28 kids have been rescued, and you got the other kids out, right? Yes, they were all out, I said to him. I said slowly, waiting to understand. He said, don't you realize that if Gardy had not been kidnapped, your team would have never come down here, and those kids would still be in slavery? And then, that's where I really get you. He says, if I have to give up my son so that these 28 kids can be rescued, that is a burden I'm willing to bear for the rest of my life. Now, it would be easy to not have that opinion, and it would be understood completely by anybody who would feel, even though, these other 28 kids were saved, they still didn't find that man's son. He could have easily gone into despair, and he would have every right to. But he found the good in the bad. And I think that kind of goes along with what I said before. Finding a reason to go on is that even though what you absolutely were hoping for had not come to pass, what helped you to go on is that something good came of it. Something good. You didn't get what you wanted, but somebody else was helped. Somebody else was able to get through because of what happened. What happened to you helped somebody else. And I believe that is the most important one of all, is that finding the good in the bad. These are the things that I found in this book that have helped these victims. And whatever you're going through in your life, and I consider the things that have happened in my life, these types of principles can help us as well. The idea that we got to face our unfortunate circumstances boldly, and to find that reason to keep going and to find that good in the bad situations and be thankful for what we do have. Is just a beautiful, things that I found in this. And maybe you would find different things in here, maybe have a completely different perspective than I came away from this. But that's the thing about the book. You can buy it. It's on their website, AWR, under Operation Underground Railroad, .com or .org or .net, whatever it is. Again, use the search engines, or find them on Instagram like I did. That's where I found them. Operation Underground Railroad. And buy the book, support their worthy cause. And again, I hope this has been a help, if nothing else, an inspiration to you. It certainly did speak a lot to me, and helps me as well. So with that, I'll be at the end of this video. I hope it's helped you and you enjoyed it, and you have a great day.